Let's get into transport operations, chapter 37. Yes, state-of-the-art technology. It's amazing. Rapid response, rapid transport. And of course, we're going to stress that lights and sirens hurt us more than help us. You know what an ambulance is. Notice, fire truck. Yep, first responders, fire trucks, fire trucks, fire trucks. First response is, of course, very important, especially for what we do out in the country. Bantam's average on-scene time with an ambulance is 13 minutes. Average on-scene time for first responder is 5. That's quite a bit of difference in a truly emergent situation. So we commonly refer to the front as the driver's compartment. Patient compartment is in back. Lots of two-way equipment, two-way radios. There's several of those. It's very important when you start riding on an ambulance that you understand their radios and how they work. You need to be comfortable with radios, and you need to be comfortable with switching them to different channels while you're moving around or driving. What? So licensing is provided by each state. We call it MIC, Mobile Intensive Care Unit, whether we're BLS or ALS. That is the actual license that we have for the ambulances. Star Life does have to be on all 5 sides of the ambulance, roof included. How did I swear I breathe on this touchpad and it pauses this. Nice little chart for you. Look at that when you want. Equipment and supplies have to be ready. Biggest issue we face in the volunteer world is that the person before us doesn't check the ambulance, and nobody's going into the house, the firehouse or ambulance barn before at the beginning of their shift and checking out their volunteer rig. It just doesn't happen. So it is extremely important that we check our gear and make sure to replace anything we use after each call. And it really does matter. If items don't work, we need to be sure to, tag them out, notify an officer, and get a replacement on board. New equipment, everybody should be trained on. It should be approved by medical direction. It should be durable and standardized. Exactly what standardized means. As far as I'm concerned, if you have 2 or more ambulances, the equipment on each one should be the same. As far as standardized system-wide, that's a little harder to come by. We're all individual, independent organizations with our own minds and our own budgets and our own decision-making process. None of you are going to walk into a brand new ambulance that's never been stocked before. So the whole equipment and supplies according to how urgently and often they are used, absolutely true. But for the most part, we're walking onto an ambulance that's been set up that way for a very long time. And if you could think of a better way to do it, by all means. But you might have 20 or 30 people who know exactly where that piece of equipment is, and to move it could become a bit of a hassle for everybody. So it's one of those things you really have to work together as a team and decide what's best. Drawer fronts, your ambulance should be labeled. Very few of them actually are, and if they are, very few of them are actually accurate. The doors should slide open and close easily. If not, they should be repaired or properly maintained. And we know this, basic supplies, you all know this. That CPR board's a joke. There's no reason any of us should be using a CPR board. Oh, I just bit my lip. I'm bleeding. Oh, I'll finish this when I wake up. I'm going to pass out now. All right, actually, just a little bit of chapstick fixes the problem. So there you go. Yeah, I'm just sort of babbling while I dealt with my chapstick. Patient transfer equipment. Yeah, our stretcher, our backboard, our folding stove, Stokes are real Stokes, stair chair. This is all stuff we dealt with really early in this process of class. Jump kit, first in bag, airway bag, these are all things. First responder bag, these are all things we call the jump bag. First responders should have a bag. It's something that shouldn't get issued until you are comfortable bedside without any support, meaning a partner. First responders, you go into a situation, you're on your own. So you need to have a certain level of confidence and experience to do that. Nobody should come on the job first day and get issued a portable and a first responder bag. It's really not fair to you if you're a brand new responder who's never really done this stuff. Personal safety equipment is extremely important. Everybody should have a reflective vest or a high visibility jacket, your gloves, at this point a HEPA mask, N95, even a gown or two in your bag is important. Extrication equipment, as far as an ambulance is concerned, it's generally either a Halligan bar or a wrecking bar. If you've had any extrication training, there's a good chance you could pry open a door with nothing more than a wrecking bar. Navigation equipment's a fairly new thing. State of Connecticut pushed for every ambulance to have a GPS 2 or 3 years ago. I believe they actually did a grant that got every ambulance, every volunteer municipal ambulance, a GPS. So at least one EMT must be in the patient compartment during transport. According to the federal DOT, a legal crew is one EMT and one CPR trained driver. For Connecticut, it has to be an EMT and an EMR, or 2 EMTs. If there's a paramedic on board, there has to be an EMT behind the driver's seat. Inspections, yeah, good luck. But yes, they should be done daily. For the volunteers, at least weekly. But we all know it really doesn't happen, and that's an unfortunate situation. Safety devices need to work. Straps to hold things down need to work. Seatbelts need to work. Parking brakes need to work. Stop lights, turn signals, flashing lights, they all need to work. Oxygen tanks need to have somewhere where they're safely stored. An oxygen tank in a rollover is a deadly weapon. And everything should be properly secured. You should not have stuff free to float around the ambulance. We all do, but it's not a good plan. Dispatch information, dispatch phase. I was really hopeful that we would have had our tour of LCD by now. They do a really wonderful little lecture on what they do and how they do it. Hopefully at some point when this COVID nonsense is all over, we will be able to make that happen. But it doesn't look like it's going to anytime soon. So what does a dispatcher get? Obviously, they're in service 24 hours a day. You're not a dispatch center if you have regular business hours. The nature of the call, location of the patient, how many patients, how bad they're injured or how sick they are, and any other details that would matter to us. That's all this stuff dispatch is doing. Well, the most dangerous phase for the EMT is responding to the call. And most of that's based on lights and sirens driving. It is dangerous. I mean, not so much in Cornhole, but even Torrington's very benign. But once you get down into, real cities like Waterbury, and it is a very stressful and dangerous thing. We know that drivers are distracted with all their multimedia abilities while they're behind the wheel. We should always wear our seatbelts, and we need to review our dispatch information. We need to know the route to the destination. We should not get in the bus and just start driving. We should absolutely know where we're going before we start to go there. And mentally prepare for what kind of assessments you're going to have to do. Does it sound like a nonsense call where you could really take your time and dally on scene? Or do you need to get your mindset in order to get the gear you need and get into the patient side as quickly as possible? Scene size up starts when you pull up to the address. You look around. What does it look like? Is the yard in shambles? Is the house falling apart? And is it a lovely upscale residential neighborhood? And you got to look at all that stuff. Does it look like there's dangerous stuff kicking around that's going to bite you? Are there signs of a big dog? Very large piles of poop in the front yard is the sign of a big dog. How many patients are there? How difficult will it be to access? It's all stuff that as you approach the address to when you finally say, "Hi, I'm Troy, I'm an EMT," you're sizing up the scene. Determine the mechanism of injury, nature of illness, you know that. Evaluate the need for spinal immobility. Evaluate everything. Evaluate the need for anything. Evaluate your patient as soon as you can lay eyes on them. Work with your dispatch information and put it together with what you see with your own eyes, and then mix it in with what they tell you and how they respond to you. MCIs are any situation where there's more patients than there is resources to handle. And generally it's like to handle within 20 minutes. So if you get there and there's 4 patients and there's only 2 of you, technically that's a minor MCI. But you could call for additional resources and have a fire truck with EMTs or EMRs on it, or another ambulance in a few minutes. Therefore, it's not an MCI. You pull up to a school bus that wrapped itself around a tree, and there's 36 people on board injured. That's an MCI. You do not have 36 transport units within a 20-minute drive of you. I don't care where you are. Safe parking is very important. But let's go back. Mass casualty. Estimate and communicate. So you need to guess how many patients there are. You need to make sure that scene command is set up right away. If your ambulance happens to be the first one there, guess what? Your scene command until somebody else shows up that could do the job. And let somebody know if there's no scene commander yet. Let your dispatch know how many patients there are and whether or not you need to actually call an MCI. Dispatch centers, every department should have an MCI plan in place, and all you need to do is say the word MCI and the tones will start dropping. Safe parking, you need to think about how traffic's going to flow around your bus and the other equipment on scene. While you're on scene, you need to think about how you're going to get your patient from the scene to the hospital, and if where you parked is going to make it difficult to do so. 100 feet before or after the crash scene, you should be on the hospital side of the scene. That's very helpful. When I did driver training, I always tried to instruct people to park facing the hospital. So you do your turning around and you're backing up when you get there, not after you load the patient. Sometimes if it seemed critical, we'd send the passenger on the route en route to the call. Once we got there, the passenger would go in and start patient care while the driver got the ambulance properly situated. We don't want to park on sharp curves, especially in our personal vehicles. We want to make sure that they're out of the way and somewhere safe. Hopefully somewhere visible if it's on the road. If it's at night in the country with a long driveway, you might want to leave it with your lights flashing at the end of the driveway, or at least somewhere where the next responders could see it so they don't have to search for the address like you did. And this is all stuff we need to think about. We have a patient off the road or on a hiking trail. We want to park somewhere where our car is safe, where anybody approaching the car or trying to get around it will be safe, and where secondary responders could see. So the big red trucks are absolutely the fire or the traffic brake. There's been a lot of work with the NFPA and the federal DOT over the last 10 years to make sure that fire truck drivers know how to position their ambulance to deflect cars away from the crash scene. So the way this fire truck's parked, traffic coming along, if they happen to hit the fire truck, they're going to deflect to the left away from the crash scene. And the ambulance should be back behind the fire truck. Protect your ambulance. So uphill, upwind of smoke or hazmats, warning lights on. A lot of times you go non-emergency to get to the scene, and then you have to park on the road. Flip your lights on. It is the smart thing to do. If you have to block traffic, try to get it done, whatever needs to get done, as quickly as possible. If it's an unsafe scene or a highway scene, try to get the patient loaded and off the highway as soon as possible. If you really need to render some sort of care, get to the exit ramp and do it there. But try to get off that high-speed highway as soon as possible. Or if the crash is on a curve, get away from the corner to somewhere where people could see you. All right, it's been like 6 hours and 12 COVID calls, and I'm finally getting back. Good night, love you. So where are we? Traffic control? Ultimately not the deal of the EMS provider. We need to be aware that sometimes it has to happen. But really our main concern is patient care. We need to balance this with a safe scene. And if one of us needs to do a little bit of traffic control to ensure the scene is safe, then we have to do that. But ultimately, if there are injured persons and both members of the crew or you alone as a first responder have to deal with patient care, then patient care comes first. All right, so anyways, warning devices on both sides of the crash. Not something you're really going to do. Ensure orderly traffic flow, warn other drivers, and prevent another crash. This is ultimately the duties of the fire department and of the police car drivers. The issue we have is that sometimes we are first on scene, or that those other parties are not particularly able to accomplish the tasks without further assistance. Sometimes due to ineptitude, other times due to laziness, other times due to just not enough of them. So you might have to help. Traffic control is important, but again, patient care is our number one thing. What really matters for first responders is that they place their personal vehicles in a correct position, on the outside of a corner if you have to be on a corner, far down the road, totally out of the way where you won't be in the way of additional trucks, in a position to block the scene if you're worried about getting waffled. I mean, quite frankly, I'd rather my personal vehicle get waffled than I do. So these are decisions you have to make. But we certainly don't want to be the first car in and park in a way that just gums up the works for the rest of the scene. And that's something you do need to be aware of. And unfortunately, it takes time and experience to figure it out. I think that's enough on this slide. Transfer phase. The patient must be packaged for transport, right? We know that. We have to get them on our stretcher at some point. Whatever we place the patient on, they must be secured to it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You do not move a patient without securing them to whatever moving implement you're using. If you happen to put them on a backboard or something, and then you leave them on that and place them on the stretcher, they need to be secured with the stretcher straps and rails. There's no excuse not to properly secure your patient. If a patient is secured to a Reeves or a backboard or a Stokes, and then you put them on the stretcher, they then need to be secured to the stretcher as well. And that's the end of the story. They must be secured properly. We should make sure that we do not strap the patient down where their arms are under the upper belts. We need to make sure that their arms can move around. We don't want our patients to feel like they're being restrained. And we also are probably going to need their arms to do things like blood pressures and pulse ox and pulse, all that stuff. So let's make sure that we do it right. Lifting the patient into the compartment should be a two-person deal unless you have one of those really awesome automatic lifters built into your ambulance. Then it could be a one-finger deal. Technically and officially, two providers should still be controlling the stretcher at all times while loading into the ambulance. But when it really comes down to it, between you, me, and I guess whoever else happens to listen to this, you could just press that little button with your pinky finger and it's going to go up. And then you pull it out slightly and just slide it on in. If you have a manual lift situation, then you absolutely should be using 2 providers. And secure your patient. Make sure they are secure before you move them. The other important thing is load height and transport height. When you take the ambulance or the stretcher out of the ambulance, it has a bit of an incline to it. So they're on like they're sort of pitched forward. You need to make sure that once you remove them from the ambulance, you lower it down several inches until they're level. At load height, the chance of them tipping over is 60% more likely than if you lower it down just 3 inches. So this is very important. You need to do it. The person at the back of the stretcher, at the head of the bed, should also be able to see over the patient to see what they're going. Remember, the person at the head of the bed pushing is the motor. The person at the front should not be pulling. They should only be steering. You got to inform your dispatch, number of patients, where you're going. Beginning of mileage is something I don't think any of you have to do. At Trinity, we have to do that every time, beginning and ending mileage, and that's a billing thing. I think at this point, a BLS trip is now up to $18 a mile. So when you're talking about billing revenue, mileage is really important. There's also an argument that you should track mileage because it proves that you did not detour or do anything nefarious with your patient. And your transport time should match the speed for the road you're on and the distance traveled. So that's like the safety reason, but the real reason people do it is for billing. If you call in mileage to LCD, they're just going to ignore you. So be aware of that. This is all obvious. Vitals, monitor, assess, talk to, be with them. Don't just grab the tablet, ignore your patient, and do the chart. And let me tell you, at 2 in the morning on a call, that's bullshit. Nonsense. I absolutely will do that, but I'll also keep talking to them. Common banter is great. And it makes the patient think that you really care, even if you don't. And remember, it's all about image. So be sure that you continue to talk to your patient. And if you are just trying to rush through the chart, make up some nonsense story about how important it is to make sure that you document the care you provided before it leaves your ever-aging, simple mind. And that'll pretty much cover it. But you want to engage the patient. A really good provider will not touch the PCR until the call is all done. And definitely be aware of their level of need. If somebody really is critical or sick, you should absolutely be caring for them for the whole ride. And that's important. That's what we're here for, right? To care for people that are sick or injured. Obviously, you tell the dispatcher that you're there. Arrival to the triage nurse. Right now, triaging is a whole different animal. It's becoming a very unique, tedious, time-consuming process. And you need to be aware of that. You want to physically transfer the patient, get them from one bed to the other and safely do it. That's all stuff. This is stuff that I'd love to be doing with you, and at some point we're going to have to get together and actually do it. And it's important that you all know how to move a patient from the stretcher to the bed, from the bed to the stretcher. There's simple ways to do it safely and effectively. You need to make sure that the hospital rails are up. Technically it should be on the hospital staff to do it, but ultimately we're going to walk away from the patient. We don't want them rolling out of bed. That won't be good for anybody. And then you need to provide a verbal report to whoever the lead nurse or caregiver is for that patient at the hospital or wherever you bring them. And then you have to do your patient care report and restock items. Not if possible. I mean, you need to restock what is used. You need to get back to base, even if it's 2 or 3 calls later, and you need to put back on the bus whatever you used on those 2 or 3 calls. It's imperative that the next time you go out in that ambulance, it has all the gear you need or the crew needs. Again, let dispatch know if you're in service or not. And a lot of times that's a matter of, I mean, do I have everything I need to do another serious call? Or is it so contaminated that I need to go out of service to clean it? And that's the stuff that matters. So either you're clearing the hospital in service or out of service. And it matters that you let them know. Clean and disinfect should always be every call, every time. There's certainly some calls with patients that you know their history and you could be a little more lax on it. Today, in this COVID situation, we cannot be lax at all. We cannot miss one surface or one time, because that could be the difference between transmitting to you, your partner, and however many patients you have till somebody else gets in there and cleans it right. And given that this virus does seem to have some long-term effects on lung usage, it's kind of important. I mean, it's imperative that we get this right. And then again, restock your supplies. Complete and file your reports. I mean, for us at the volunteer level, generally, once we get back to base or even once we clear the hospital, dispatch system resets and they're going to tone out for the next call, regardless of what you tell them. Routine inspections, refuel your ambulance. These are all things that should be done on a regular basis by regular people. Key terms: cleaning, disinfect, high-level disinfect, sterilize. So right now we are at the sterilize phase after every single call. And that involves a big old spray bottle with a whole lot of bleach in it. I mean, it's a 1 to 10 solution. But you have to spray down the entire ambulance, every surface that won't be changed colors by the bleach. The bleach has a 24-hour shelf life for clinical disinfection. So you need to make sure that you date that bottle. And it's a ginormous pain in the ass, kids, but it's really important. Linens, obviously. I mean, at this point, we're not keeping any spare linens on the stretcher. We're putting on the stretcher only what's absolutely necessary. Everything else should be in a cabinet, out of the way, where nobody could breathe on it. I mean, wash contaminated areas with soap and water. That's really not good enough at the moment. It needs to be with a viral solution like Virex, or with bleach, 1 to 10 or better. Waste should all get discarded, medical or otherwise. Clean the stretcher, germicidal, virucidal. I mean, the AF3, the Sandy cloth, anything AF3 or better will work. What I call red tops, like the wipes that Charlotte had for years and years and years, those aren't good enough. And that's something that in today's new viral age, we need to be aware of. What will actually clean and kill what we're dealing with. A schedule for routine full cleaning of the emergency vehicle. Good luck with that. Volunteer or commercial service, good luck with that. Written policies and procedures, cleaning each piece of equipment. Absolutely, you should have some sort of policy or procedure. And again, good luck with getting it to be adhered to. Oh, cool, an ambulance on its side. This ambulance rolled at least one full 360-degree rotation. That is destroyed. Most likely people are dead. The average ambulance rollover, the provider kills the patient. And the provider tends to either die or be seriously wounded as well. What we have in general is that providers are not secured in the back of the ambulance. It's all right. Speak freely. My class is a good bunch. Go ahead. You can make fart noises. It's okay. So, all right, back to the rolled over ambulance. So we tend not to be secured in the back of the ambulance. We're supposed to be. Hey, did you know that? Yeah, the provider's supposed to be belted as well. We don't. None of us do. And in the rollover, we get bounced around and end up crushing the patient. The other issue is if shoulder straps are not on or are not on correctly, a head-on situation, the patient actually flies forward and crushes their head and vertebrae when they hit whatever they hit. So yeah, ambulance collisions are a serious thing. Remember, you're not talking just one person, you're talking three. And only one of them is correctly fastened in a forward-facing situation. So we need to be very hyper vigilant on safe driving when we have people in the back of the ambulance, especially when the people in the back of the ambulance are screaming at you to hurry the hell up because you need to get where you're going because the patient's circling and you don't want to be stuck doing CPR for the rest of the trip. Yeah, completion of an emergency vehicle operations course. Connecticut doesn't actually have that for ambulance drivers. There's courses like CEVO, which is defensive driving for offensive drivers like us. It's a very basic nonsense course that teaches you how to, always pass on the left, and come to complete stops at every stoplight and intersection, change from wail to yelp, and toot your air horn 2 times when you approach an intersection. All that nonsense that doesn't actually help anybody. Physical fitness, you've looked at me, right? Yeah, I'm a damn good driver, so I'm going to have to count that part out. Alertness, that absolutely does matter. Emotional maturity, clearly not. Clearly not necessary. Stability, again, I'm going to have to lean with personal experience and say not so much. And due regard for the safety of others and preservation of property. Due regard for the safety of others is in every state law regarding emergency vehicle operations in the nation. That is an important term that needs to be near and dear to your heart. And due regard could mean a lot of things, but ultimately it means that if you do crash, it's probably on you. Speed does not save lives. Good care does. Oh, that's such a sweet and sentimental statement. In general, it's right. In general, lights and sirens only save a few minutes. If a few minutes, I mean, a really long trip, Torrington to Hartford, lights and sirens and a heavy right foot can save you quite a bit of time. I mean, 20 minutes. I think my best time is 34 minutes from Charlotte to Hartford Hospital. I'm impressed with that. 28 from St. Mary's to Hartford Hospital, or 28 from St. Mary's to CCMC. That time I'm proud of. But anyways, that's going really fast and scaring the hell out of Mom sitting in the passenger seat. It was great. Become familiar with how the vehicle accelerates, corners, sways, and stops. Very important. One of the best things you could do as far as driving an ambulance is figure out how to accelerate and brake without the caregiver or patient in the back feeling it. You need to plan your stops well ahead of time, and you need to, take off slowly unless it's truly a critical situation, in which case you might want to drive a little bit more rapidly. But still, if your caregivers are in the back giving care, you can't be tossing them around. I mean, there's methods for keeping yourself sort of planted in the bus and braced. But just the same, if you're really trying to take care of a patient, you need to know that you're not going to get tossed from the bench across to the CPR seat going around a corner. And that comes with practice and experience. New drivers should go slower than someone who's been doing it for 20 years. There's just no way around that. Stay in the extreme left-hand lane on multi-lane highways. This is true. You should always be in the left lane if you are going lights and sirens. If you're taking a nice, easy ride down the highway, then you should stay in the right lane. Let the cars, the speed demons, go around you, and understand that most wrong way drivers on the highway will be in your left lane. They tend to be drunk or altered, and when somebody is drunk or altered and operating a motor vehicle, they tend to want to be in the slow lane and just go with the flow and not get caught. So most of your wrong way drivers on the highway are in the left lane, and more crashes happen in the left lane than the right lane. So when you really look at statistics, the safest place to be on the highway is in the right lane, or the middle lane if there's a lot of on and off ramp traffic. But if you're going lights and sirens, you should absolutely be in the left lane. Decision to activate the emergency lighting and sirens will depend on protocols, patient condition, clinical outcome of the patient, traffic lights, all that stuff. Always assume that motorists around your vehicle have not heard your siren or seen you. Drive defensively. This is absolutely true. Assume that the drivers around you are absolute morons and are going to do the wrong thing. You need to be prepared for anything. A lot of people will ultimately be trying to do the right thing, and they get flustered or scared, or they're just not very good drivers and they do the wrong thing. A safe following distance from the vehicle in front of you will help you avoid throwing your partner. If you have, when you take your regular driving test, they tell you to keep 2 seconds away from most vehicles, 3 seconds away from big trucks and school buses, or motorcycles and school buses. When you're driving an ambulance, you should be 4 seconds distance from the car in front of you, unless you're heavily accelerating to get on them with your lights and sirens because you want them to get the hell out of your way. But even then, you need to have a high index of suspicion as to how they will react. Try to avoid being tailgated from behind. Yeah, how do you do that? There's no way for you to do that. I mean, if somebody's going to tailgate you, the one thing you can do that's absolutely not legal, and I would never ever recommend to anybody, is to hit the little button for your loading lights and turn them babies on just for a second. That's all it'll take for them to be completely blind, veer off to the right, and crash into a tree. They will no longer be riding on your bumper. But again, I would never ever recommend doing that. Never, no. I'm just saying, I mean, it could be done. It would certainly get them off your butt. But that would just be, that would be wrong, morally, legally, just totally unacceptable. Ensure that blind spots do not prevent you from seeing vehicles or, How do you do that? They're blind spots. What do you do about them? One thing you could do to reduce them is most of us put our rear view mirrors set so that you could see the side of the vehicle you're driving. Very common. It gives us a sense of spatial recognition. But if you just tip it out a tiny bit more so you cannot actually see your own vehicle, you will reduce your blind spots by about 35%. And when you're talking about a blind spot, that's huge. So next time you're in your car and you look in your mirror and you could just get that line of your vehicle in the mirror, just tip it out an extra, quarter inch, half inch, just enough to where you cannot see your vehicle. I mean, your vehicle's there, right? You're in it. Try that. It'll take a few days to get used to, and then you'll never do it again. The other thing you could do is lean forward in your seat, and it'll change your angle and let you see into some of that blind spot as well. Never ever get out of the ambulance to confront another driver. Guess what? A lot of people are smart enough to know that ambulance personnel do not carry guns. So you don't have to fight. And plus, you're driving a giant billboard. That's not the image you want for whatever service you're working for. It's just not a good plan. Blind spots, scan mirrors. You should constantly be checking your mirrors, constantly. Like every 3 seconds, you should be glancing into your mirrors. Excessive speed is fun. It's exhilarating. It is, did I mention it's fun? It can also be terrifying for everybody else in the vehicle but you. In general, it is dangerous and it rarely increases the patient's chance of survival. But it is fun, especially with the wee-woos going and the flashies. And, you know, you're on the highway in rush hour and it's parting like the Red Sea when Moses did his thing. Oh, it's magical. Such a rush. But anyways, it's dangerous and you shouldn't do it. And again, it absolutely makes it very hard for the provider in the back of the ambulance if they're constantly getting tossed around like a ship on a wild sea. It's no good. Hinders the driver's reaction time. So that's not entirely accurate the way they say that. So the reaction time is going to be the same. What changes is the amount of distance traveled in that reaction time. So, you know, the time it takes you to say, oh no, I need to stop, to actually hitting the brake pedal might be 50 feet at 20 miles an hour. It might be 500 feet at 90 miles an hour. So it's a big difference. And you're reacting the same amount of time. It's taking the same amount of time for your brain to tell your foot to move. But you're covering that much more distance in that amount of time. And it absolutely increases the time and distance needed to stop the ambulance. You can do crash test video searches on YouTube and stuff. You could just search the interwebs for stopping distances at different speeds. There's actually, I think it's like algebraic equations to figure out the stopping distance for whatever tonnage vehicle you have at whatever speed you choose. And you could see how incredibly long the distance is to stop. It's actually impressive. If you know any police car drivers that are accident scene reconstruction specialists, they will know these formulas to figure out stopping distances. A lot of them, if they've been doing it a while, will just know that, you know, a 3-ton vehicle is going to take, I really don't know. I'm just going to throw out a number for the fun of it, 1,000 feet to stop at 50 miles an hour. Siren syndrome really is a thing. It does create a desire of, it just makes people drive faster. It takes a lot of training and experience and field time to go the speed limit with the siren going. Vehicle size and distance judgment, absolutely a thing. The spotters are great. A lot of places will have rules about using spotters, and then you actually get at a precarious scene and your partner's in the back with the patient, because you can't leave the patient in the back without a provider, and you're backing up without a spotter. But then you get back to your base where you know what obstacles are there, and there's your spotter, and God forbid you do it without a spotter. Spotters are great, and it's wonderful if you could have them. Backup cameras are great, but remember there's a huge blind spot issue with backup cameras. So this is not something you could learn looking at still pictures. This requires field experience with somebody who knows how to teach you to drive, or videos where you could really see these vehicles moving. And that's one thing about the CEVO. They have like little cartoon videos with the vehicle doing these things, and it makes sense. You do want to take nice wide turns. 2-turn, and you just change the point at which the passengers feel the turn. Too early and you break the line, or you you go off the side of the road. So this is a difficult task to teach, especially through the spoken word. It's really something where you need to get out there and experience it. Weather, again, when the roads are slippery, your braking time's worse. You are more prone to roll over in a van ambulance than a box ambulance. I mean, the boxes, Cornwall, Bantam's ambulance, I don't know, what other, Goshen's the same thing. They're those giant box ambulances. They're pretty steady. They have the big dually wheels on the back, and again, they really don't roll all that often, unless there's additional forces applied. Hydroplaning is definitely an issue. Slipping on the ice is definitely an issue. If you have one of those awesome four-wheel drive ambulances, remember that they're four-wheel drive. They're not four-wheel stop. They'll be four-wheel slide, but we need to go slower in nasty weather. Laws and regulations. This is, I've often said black and white rules for gray areas. Well, a lot of these rules, these laws and regulations are extremely gray as far as motor vehicle laws. Terms like due regard are common. We absolutely can do the old, I'm an ambulance, I'll do what I want. Driving toward oncoming traffic in their lane, sure. Blowing through stoplights and stop signs, yes. Going the wrong way down a one-way street, absolutely. Parking in the middle of the road, sure. It all happens. We do it all. Throwing it in reverse in the middle of the road and just backing up because you passed the address, maybe once or twice in a career, once or twice in a week. Pulling a sudden U-turn or K-turn in the middle of a busy street, sure, absolutely. Why not? All the cool kids are doing it. So these are all things that we get to do. After a while of doing this stuff, you might find that you're stopping at green lights and going on red. That could be the sign of a problem, and maybe you're working a bit too much. So be aware of that. Try not to let it happen. But I'm not going to lie. Oh my God, I'm being attacked by a shovel. I swear I had a drink. Oh, there it is. Car number 14. Oh, and the hits just keep on coming. Figures, Sarah just laid down.
14. 14, thank you. It's going to be Wolcott Hall, 215 Forest Street, room 1.
Wolcott Hall for the COVID symptoms. 49 Charlie is now this new COVID code, because we can't just say it. If you have any family at Wolcott Hall, get them out. Get them out now. You are on a call. Did I change? No, I tried. Why would it change? There we go. Never allowed to pass a school bus. Never, ever, ever allowed to pass a school bus with its yellow or red lights flashing. You turn off your siren, you sit and you wait. We need to keep our children safe. That's the end of the story. You never, ever pass a school bus with the red lights flashing. For the most part, school bus drivers are great about turning them off as soon as possible. Have fun storming the castle. Wear 2 gowns. That place is gross. So if their red lights are on, they mean it. You will have your license revoked if you get caught doing this. And God forbid you actually waffle a kid. Who's going to feel bad for the rest of their lives? You are. So yeah, be very careful. There's a huge push that came out of Europe to stop using lights and sirens for every freaking call. A lot of volunteer services have an internal policy that if somebody calls 911, you're going to put on the lights and sirens and get to the call. The EMD system is supposed to tell you how to respond to the call. Lights and sirens, no lights and sirens. There's no more lights only, which used to be a thing. When I started, there was priority 1, 2, and 3. Priority 1 was lights and sirens. Priority 2 was lights only. Priority 3 was with the flow of traffic. Massachusetts, if you had a patient in the ambulance up until like 5 or 10 years ago, you had to have your lights flashing. So if it was a non-emergency thing, they'd be stopped at a stoplight with the lights flashing. But anytime you had a patient on board, you had to have the lights flashing. It was a ridiculous law, and it finally got repealed. But that was Massachusetts. So it's supposed to be a true emergency. I mean, the days of going to a trauma center and then going back home, lights and sirens as well, just because you wanted to get back to your dinner, those are over. Not allowed. Siren and lights are supposed to be used in conjunction, together. I'm totally opposed to this at 2 in the morning or on, country roads or residential areas when you're not going super fast. But by law, the siren's on. I'm sorry, if the lights are on, the siren's on. And that is the law. There's no gray area there. But as far as community relations, public relations, if you go tearing out a West Cornwall firehouse at 2 in the morning, blasting your siren every time you go out, the neighbors are going to take issue with that. And I know there aren't that many neighbors out there, but that one guy might cause quite a ruckus for you. And think about it. I mean, are the lights and sirens going to get you there any quicker? Is there any traffic that you need to get out of the way? So ultimately, if they're not needed, don't use them. I know it's fun and exciting, but when it comes down to it, it's not going to save you anything. An unit must be operated with due regard for others' safety. That's definitely the law in Connecticut. It's pretty much the law everywhere. Right to disregard rules of the road when responding in emergency mode. You cannot endanger people or property ever. And you need to know your local right-of-way privileges. Some localities have specific rules. In general, the ambulance should let the police car drivers go first, and the fire truck should let the ambulance go first. Any of you watch Emergency? I mean, if you don't, I'm pretty sure it's still on Netflix. You younger whippersnappers should look for episodes of Emergency on YouTube or Netflix or Amazon and watch them. The first couple of episodes are the true life history of the paramedic service when it started in California. And the way they respond, you'll see that the rescue truck, the paramedics are always in front of the fire truck. And that's simply because they could be seen. And, the little rescue truck running behind the giant fire truck, people aren't going to see it, and they're more likely to crash. So you put the little vehicle out front, and it's just a safer situation for both vehicles. Use as a guide only when you are in unfamiliar territory. So in general, one emergency vehicle driving alone is going to be safer than a couple, in a caravan, because people don't normally expect 2 in a row. I mean, sometimes it happens, but even fire trucks tend to try to space themselves out a little bit. It's just safer for everybody.
2146.
Traffic lights, you should be at least slowing down substantially, if not coming to a complete stop. I mean, I am one that will lose my shit on my partner if they come to a complete stop for an empty intersection with a full clear field of view from 250 feet away. All right, no, that's ridiculous. But yes, according to law, you're supposed to come to a complete stop at every light. It's just you need to be smart. Use common sense. And yes, I'm going to say it. You don't have to follow every rule to a T, but you need to act safely and make sure that you don't waffle anyone. It's very important not to run anybody over. Highways, absolutely. When you first get on the highway, you should shut down and get up to speed, and then turn them on. Unpaved roads, I mean, straight up, don't bounce everybody all over the place. In school zones, it is unlawful to exceed the speed limit in school zones. You need to be aware of that. I mean, for the most part, we do what we want, but if anything bad happens in a school zone, and you were doing, even 10 over posted, you're going to have some issues. So be aware of that. Driving, anticipate roadway hazards. Very important. So minimize distractions. For the most part, your passenger, if you have one, should be manning the radio, manning an MDT or GPS if you have it. MDT is mobile dispatch terminal. For the most part, our volunteer services aren't using MDTs. Stereo, cell phones, eating and drinking should be kept to a minimum. I'm a total hypocrite saying that. I was talking to my kids driving from the hospital back to base tonight. But again, especially at the beginning, when you first start doing this stuff, you should absolutely limit how much other stuff you do. Learning to talk on the radio while driving lights and sirens down a busy road takes some practice. And you need to accept that and work within your abilities. Safest route while mentally preparing for the call. So think responding to the call in your POV. First, you have to determine, do I need to go to the scene or to the barn? And then what's the best route to get to the scene if I'm going there? What's the best route to get to the barn? Is there a bridge out? Is there a road that I know is going to be, washed out, or just a muddy mess because it's raining and there's dirt? So sometimes the shortest distance isn't necessarily the fastest distance. Where's there going to be more traffic lights and traffic? You got to factor all this stuff in while in your head you're preparing for what you're going to deal with when you get there. And this is extremely hard when you were woken up from your REM sleep at 3:30 in the morning, and now you got to get in your cold vehicle because nope, you don't have a garage. Recognize when you are fatigued and alert your partner or supervisor. So when you get into commercial EMS, they really don't care. It's your job. You signed up for it. Get it done. And quite frankly, if you fall asleep behind the wheel, it's your ass, not the company's, for making you work a 24-hour shift. You should be placed out of service for the remainder of your shift. Good luck to that. Good luck getting an employer to do that. They're absolutely right. You should be. Oh, air medical operations. Oh my gosh. So fixed wing really isn't something we're going to see up here in the Northeast. Helicopters are the way to go. Some of your bigger states will have fixed wing a lot more prevalent. I mean, for us, the most common fixed wing is the patient's been in Florida at their summer home. They get very sick and they want to come home to their family to die. That kind of thing is where you'll see fixed wing here. But for the most part, you're not going to see fixed wing planes and stuff in this part of the world. Helicopters are going to be our situation. All right, I just got cupcake all over my computer. My partner just walked up with a big container of cupcakes. Think I said no? No. So it'll absolutely be helicopters that you're going to deal with. Mm-hmm. Yum, yum, yum. All right, just another second, kids. I got some frosting on my fingers. I've heard one of the worst things you could do on the radio is eat. Okay, I'm back. So by God, you better have specially trained crews accompanying air ambulance flights. EMTs provide ground support. That's sweet. And medevac, our emergency operations, are going to be a whirlybird, a helicopter. I'm confident throughout this course we've done a great job of discussing the LifeStar and when to call for medevac. I mean, the big one is transport time by ground. That's huge. Traffic or environmental conditions are another big one. Patient requiring advanced care. Generally, your medevac providers are, critical care specialists. LifeStar will have a paramedic nurse. So generally, they're a paramedic first, became a RN, and their partner will be a respiratory therapist or some other kind of critical care specialist, and then the pilot. But you're not talking just a regular paramedic and an EMT on an air ambulance. So if you think your patient's going to need rapid sequence intubation or some other extreme level critical care, LifeStar's the way to go. Remember, it's for medical care as much as trauma. For the most part, we see medevac as a traumatic injury situation. But it's not. If you have, our whale in the hoarder house who had been pinned between the bed and the bureau for 4 or 7 days because they were embarrassed to call for help because people would see what squalor they lived in. And you need to spend an hour to extricate that person through the window with a ladder truck and a rope hoist system with the ladder extended over the house and all that stuff. Yeah, call for LifeStar, because guess what? They're going to fly in, they're going to land, they're going to come to the scene, they're going to work in your ambulance and intubate and do all that great stabilization stuff in the back of your ambulance. And you now have a critical care team to help you take care of this medical patient. And guess what? That whale might lose her leg, but other than that, she's going to live. How the hell that woman lives, I will never understand. Just blows my mind what the human body could endure. So yeah, that alone is a good reason to call. Multiple patients will overwhelm resources at the hospital, reachable by ground transport. So this could be a situation where you have 2 or 3 critical patients from whatever event occurred, and putting one of them on a helicopter and taking them to another hospital a little bit further away will allow the other ones that are going by ground to be properly cared for at the hospital that's closer. So all this stuff has to be factored in. The other thing that you really have to factor in when you're being a true patient advocate is the fact that state does not regulate the cost of the helicopter. So there's no telling what that cost will be. You're generally in Connecticut within our borders, it's $30,000 or $40,000 to take a helicopter ride. And your insurance company is most likely only paying 10% of that. So you really need to be aware of that. Time-dependent injuries or illnesses, strokes, heart attacks, spinal cord injuries. Spinal cord injuries are an interesting one where if the air is very turbulent and it'll be a bouncy ride, they might not accept the mission because they're concerned that you're going to bounce the patient too much in the air. And it is a legitimate concern. Scuba diving, near drownings, wilderness accidents where they're, very remote and you can't really get to them with a regular ambulance. Your traumatic patients, absolutely, all day long. and limb replantation, burn centers, hyperbaric, venomous bites. These are, again, all specialty center candidates that can't just go to any hospital. Who do you call? You call the dispatcher. We do not call Lifestar directly. We call our dispatch. The dispatch handles it. We absolutely can communicate with the Lifestar crew or the medevac crew once they get within, 5 or so miles of us. In LCD, we have air. I think it's AirTAC is the frequency, but it's specifically for talking to the helicopter. And all the medevacs that'll come into Litchfield County have it in their radios, and they know to go to it. Landing zone, 100 by 100 feet is the best. No loose debris, little or no loose debris, little or no overhead hazards. If you do have hazards, you need to notify them. Mark the landing site using cones or vehicles. You do not want anything that illuminates. For the most part, the Lifestar crews at night are going to use night vision to land, and you don't want to make that more difficult for them. Non-essential persons and vehicles need to get out of the way. Communicate the direction of strong wind to the flight crew. For the most part, if there's really strong wind, they're probably not going to come in. Safe distance from the aircraft whenever it's on. Away from the tail rotor. Approach from the front. Do what the crew tells you. In working with helicopters over the years, the flight crew will be very good at keeping you safe. For the most part, those rotors are like 15 feet up in the air. You don't have to duck, but by God, if you're not going to, I will be impressed. And the tail rotor is the big one. When it's spinning, you really can't see it. It's just a little blur, and it will tear you up. Main rotor blades can dip. It's not that common. If it's going to be running when you're approaching it, it's going to be at a speed at which dip is very unlikely. The tail rotor is the big one. Familiar with hand signals? Generally, they're fairly apparent what they mean. Do not approach unless instructed and accompanied by the flight crew. Do not, under any circumstances, just take it upon yourself to go up to that helicopter. Do not attempt to do anything or help with anything unless you are instructed to do so by the flight crew. Make sure everything's secured to their stretcher. No flame of any sort anywhere near it. Eye protection is great if you have it. So for the most part, you're not going to see too many of this stuff. But those are the official hand signals, and it wouldn't hurt you to take a look at those and memorize them. Spotlight, flashlight, or any light is not going to help the pilot. Any lights that are there should be focused on the ground, overhead hazards, or obstructions, illuminated if possible. That is something that you should communicate through the AirTag channels and ensure that the crew actually wants you to. And, once they come in the area, they'll contact you on the frequency that's been designated. And you could ask them at that time. There is, telephone poles to the, northeast side of the landing zone. Do you want them illuminated? They will tell you yes or no. Uneven ground. I don't think I've ever seen them land on uneven ground. There's almost always somewhere you could go that's flat for the Lifestar crew. If you do land on uneven ground, you should be approaching from the downhill side. That is something to remember. downhill side. Hazardous material incidents, they're probably not going to come to your scene. You're going to really want to give all that details to dispatch and make sure that they notify the crew before they even accept the mission. And then again, you are going to want to make sure that landing zone is uphill and upwind, that patients are properly decontaminated before they get in the helicopter, and that you clearly communicate with the flight crew when they land. You should probably be communicating with the pilot before they land to make sure that they don't come through a noxious cloud of gas or whatever else the case may be. Severity of weather and terrain. For the most part, for us in northwestern Connecticut, I don't know that we have access to a helicopter that can hover and rescue. I mean, we see it all the time. Coast Guard hovers and rescues all the time. It's what they do. But I don't think any of our medevac services could do that. That'll come out here to us. If your patient's super heavy, you need to make sure they know that, because that is going to affect things. And that's apparently it. This one, samples of standard patient transfer equipment accept. What is the answer? A. Should carry a primary wheeled ambulance stretcher, a wheeled stair chair, a long backboard and a short backboard. A Stokes basket is not a standard piece of moving equipment. All right, that makes sense. So yeah, there's like 40 of these. So we'll give them all a few seconds and we'll do it. I'll let you know that one person has already responded to my are you still listening from the last presentation. At these, I mean, we should expect to see some stuff on lifting and moving when it comes test taking time. I think it's D. Yep. Jump kit, 5-minute kit. All right, I'm not going to read anymore. I'll give you 3 seconds time to pause. Yep, I'm still here. I swear it. If you could take a moment in your spare time, which I know some of you actually have right now, and let me know if there are any parts of this course that you are concerned about, that you want some review on, or maybe some additional knowledge on, and we'll put something together. I also want to get together at some point and do some of the stretcher operation stuff. I mean, I know we did a little bit of it towards the beginning of the class, but I would like to do, transfer patient from bed to stretcher, or from stretcher to bed. I would like to discuss lights and radios. It would be good to see y'all again, because quite frankly, I feel like I'm shirking my responsibilities just doing these lectures online. I should probably look at doing some live something or other. If any of you know how that works, get in touch and let me know. Two, three, move. Send me a text message with the number 7. Anytime, day or night. Upwind and uphill is very important that you remember.